Hello procrastinators, Sam here, and today I want to give more of my thoughts on Sonic X Shadow Generations. I don't like that name. I don't know why. It's so hard for me to remember what it's called. Sonic X Shadow Generations. Whatever. So regarding the game, I did do my reaction recently, so if you guys haven't seen my reaction and my initial thoughts on the matter, go ahead and watch it. You guys have been amazing in the comments, and the views have been quite big this time, so I think you guys are tuning into that. But yes, I want to give more of my thoughts on the game itself, because I feel like I've given my thoughts on both Twitter, and I give my thoughts on my live stream, and I gave some of my thoughts on the reaction video. Now that the hype has kind of died down, I want to give more concise thoughts here. And the first thing I want to mention before going into the Shadow stuff is just the Sonic Generations portion of this game. I think it's important to know that clearly from the trailer, which has been confirmed that the footage we are seeing is not the old game in its entirety. It is running off the new engine, and people found this out because there are some very small bugs appearing regarding the lighting, because clearly this game is running on Hedgehog Engine 1, but you know, the porting from Hedgehog Engine 1 to newer consoles is probably causing some growing pains, because they haven't really used Hedgehog 1 in a while, and they've been using Hedgehog 2 for the longest time. So I don't know how programming works, but there are a few bugs that we noticed in the lighting. It's not severe. The game looks like it plays exactly the same. I'm actually going to be on the camp that this is not a Sonic Colors Ultimate situation. It's really not. It's some very small nitpick things that people have picked up on. Some lighting in some areas are a bit broken, like some blades of grass. It's whatever. But I do know, like, for example, there's a bug that also has been in the PC port of the game where when you upscale to 4K, those energy balls, when you get rings, they don't go to the boost meter. They're like going off screen and stuff like that. So I just want to say, regarding my thoughts on Generations itself, I'm actually pleasantly surprised the game is not more different like Colors Ultimate. I'm actually genuinely surprised about that. I'm also aware that's an incredibly low bar to be like, wow, they're porting the same game over and it's not completely broken. Awesome job. But I'm sorry, but that is the bar we were kind of at for the longest time. And I am happy to say, yeah, the game looks relatively intact. I'm not seeing major problems. I'm not seeing a huge lighting change to the likes of Colors Ultimate. Generations looks like Generations, and that's what's important. Any of those small details, you know, the game doesn't come out till autumn. I'm hoping some of the stuff would be patched by then. But if not, even if the game comes out how it is now, I'm really not complaining. It really is just such a small thing. So really, I'm just here to say I am actually pleasantly surprised with how the game is looking, because I know I was very skeptical when I heard they're remastering Generations. I do want to briefly comment about Classic Sonic. I did say my hopes for Classic Sonic's gameplay is that they would make the gameplay be more like it with Superstars. Now looking at it in hindsight, I am well aware that if what they're doing here is not necessarily like a remake, but it's a remaster, it's the same game just porting over, then I understand his gameplay not necessarily being different. So as much as I like the gameplay in Superstars more than Generations, the fact that his gameplay looks to be the same, I'm really not complaining. I think that's totally fine. So I am happy with how Generations itself is looking so far. It's looking great. But all right, enough about that. Let's talk about why we're all really excited about this project, the meat and potatoes, the Shadow portion of the game. The main reason why I'm sure many of us, including myself, is actually really excited about this project. The Shadow portion of the game is clearly running off of Hedgehog Engine 2. A lot of people online have been speculating this based on the footage, and I'm inclined to believe that. I could tell from the gameplay, from what I noticed, and what I noticed on the live stream, is that based off of his boost aura, it looks like they might be using a bit of his gameplay and forces as a kind of like a base. But I do think he's probably gonna play somewhat differently than that. I mean, the boost aura itself looks way more issue than it does in Forces. It doesn't look like Forces at all. You can tell that they probably started there as a base, and I'm hoping they took more inspiration of the gameplay in Frontiers, especially the open world controls. I did talk a great deal about my excitements about the game and how much I like it, and how it's looking, and the animations, and the graphics, and the fact that Black Doom is coming back, and he's on Space Colony Arc, and it looks super good, and the spectacle looks amazing. I talked positively many times about this, but I do want to share a little bit of not necessarily critiques, but some of my initial worries. The first thing I'm going to mention, and I know that there's really not much we could talk about regarding this because there wasn't a whole lot of gameplay, a lot of it was kind of spectacle, is the level design. The level design so far looks pretty decent. It looks like there are multiple pathways, and many clips I've seen in screenshots, there does always appear to be at least 2 pathways I'm seeing, which is good. I like seeing multiple pathways in my Sonic game, which is great, but there is just the slightest bit where I'm worried that it might be a bit linear, only because I think of like one specific shot that is making me think this here, where, you know, we get shots like this where right there you have dash pads on the turn, which I know I don't like automation in my Sonic games. I've really been wanting them to kind of steer away from all the automation. I feel like there has been too much automation in Sonic games as of late, but I'm not going to, you know, say the entire, like this, no, not this whole game doesn't look good. I'm not going to say that. This is just my initial worries, but it's only one shot, so I'm really not going to stress too much about this. I feel like this part, if anything, is probably an automated section in a boss fight, because you do see Black Doom flying around in the level, and my guess is maybe this is just a chase sequence and the world is changing around him. You probably go through a bunch of portals or something. So this is more so, it's definitely a valid worry to have because of how past Sonic games have been designed. But I feel like more so my whole goal here is to kind of ease some people's thoughts about this online, that I think this is just a segment of the game, like a spectacle segment that's linear because, you know, Black Doom is flying around and all that stuff. So I think based off the screenshots and other footage we've been seeing, there are a good amount of other pathways. So I don't really think that's too much of a worry, but it is something to keep an eye on, and we'll definitely keep an eye on the more we see more trailers of the game and the more gameplay we see. But considering everything we've seen right now and the fact that we haven't seen much of the levels so far, I feel like that's a worry that really needs to be put on the back burner in the meantime. We haven't seen enough to really validly give critiques about that. But the main worry I really do have is the length of this campaign. How significant is Shadow's campaign? If you guys heard my thoughts about remastering Generations, is okay, you can't really make the game look any better than the original. The original already looked amazing, and it was already on PC for the longest time. We already had 60 FPS. We were already able to upscale to 4K. We had many mods that made the game look better than anything Sega could possibly do, and added levels, and even added unleashed levels. So if you're going to remaster Sonic Generations, my initial thoughts was you need to add content. So this Shadow campaign is exactly what I'm talking about. That is content, but how much is the content? Are we talking like a 2-hour campaign? Are we talking maybe a 1-hour campaign? Are we talking 20 minutes? Are we talking an episode Shadow here? I feel like this is a valid worry because I believe the person who is running this project is Sean Nakamura, who was the producer for Sonic Forces. Now, I'm not trying to throw shade at him. We don't know, you know, to what extent, you know, things have changed in Sonic Forces. You know, even Mario Kishimoto, I mean, he worked on a lot of Sonic games in the past that really didn't hold up well, and he's proven himself. But I think clearly from Sean Nakamura's tweet, it implies that I think he's the one heading this project, because I think, if you think about it, Mario Kishimoto has been the one working on Frontiers all this time. He's been working on the updates recently, very recently, in the last year or so. So I don't think Mario Kishimoto had probably any time to really have much involvement in this project. And Sean Nakamura mentions our team is working hard, so please be patient. So I think right there it tells me, okay, so he's probably the one heading the project, which, by the way, I'm totally fine with that. As long as we have 2 teams working on Sonic interchangeably, I think that's a good idea, so that way one team doesn't get burned out and it gives the other team time to really make a game before it has to come out without having to rush a Sonic title every year, every 2 years. I'm not against that at all. But there is a worry for me because, you know, he did produce Sonic Forces. I know early on in Sonic Forces, he did some interviews where he was talking about like dashing like a maniac, and that was the whole goal of the game. And it's like, yeah, but boosting in a straight line can only be fun for maybe 60 seconds, you know what I mean, before it gets boring. So I'm not trying to throw shade at him. I'm just trying to say, you know, this is a legitimate worry I have, is Are we talking an episode shadow here? Are we talking that the levels are going to be the size of Sonic Forces levels? Or are they going to be decently length levels? Is it going to be a decent story? I just don't want to kind of go back to that Forces style of like the levels not really taking off before they end, you know, the story kind of being meh. You know, I know Ian Flynn has taken the story for this one as well because of his tweets, which is great, but I do know he only gets to work with what Sonic Team gives him. So I really do hope that Nakamura-san, that they improve on what they've done with Forces a lot. And looking at the gameplay so far, it does look like they definitely did improve, and I hope they actually took some notes from Frontiers. I hope Kishimoto also, you know, gave them stuff about like the spin dash, all that stuff, so that way they don't have to like make it from scratch. I hope that they definitely pass notes to each other. But yes, that is a legitimate worry I have, is I'm wondering, you know, how long this campaign is and how meaningful it is. I hope it's as long as possible. I hope, you know, I'm not saying it has to be, you know, the size of Frontiers. I'm hoping it's probably at least the size of Forces in terms of length, just because, you know, it is just a side campaign. So I do hope it's at least, you know, maybe 2 hours, maybe even, I'll give them a pass if it's even like an hour 30. As long as it gives us at least over an hour of new content, that'll make me happy. But the longer, the better. But I will say, the spectacle and everything we've seen so far, and even the boss fights with BioLizard and all that stuff looks amazing. And I think we have a real treat in our hands here. We're gonna have to see more as time goes on. I could be totally wrong in the future. This probably could age very badly if it ends up, you know, flopping or not being great. But I'm looking forward to it. I really am. And speaking of boss fights, because I know we talked about the BioLizard boss fight and how much fun that looked, and I know that we also have Black Doom returning, and I'm sure we're gonna have a boss fight with him as well, because at the end of the day, from what they described in the website and online, essentially Shadow's going through his you know, his past, kind of like how Sonic is going through his past. Shadow's doing the exact same. So we're probably going to be seeing a lot of locations, key locations, you know, from past Sonic games that Shadow was in, probably like, you know, maybe some Prison Island stuff, maybe, you know, like Green Forest or White Forest, sorry, as well as some other stuff from maybe even Sonic 06. A big one though that a lot of people are hoping, and I guess I am too, is will Mephiles return? For people that like Mephiles, this is probably the closest chance you're gonna get to him possibly returning, because Shadow had a pretty big encounter against Mephiles in Sonic 06, and if we're going through each main Shadow boss, Mephiles is one of them. You know, hell, Sonic didn't even really get a chance to fight Mephiles a whole lot. He mainly went after Solaris, but Mephiles was Shadow's main bad guy in Sonic 06, so if there is a Mephiles boss in this game, since we're going through Shadow's past, I think it'd be great. And it could work too. They already have Sonic 06 assets from Generations itself with, I believe it's a Flame Core in Crisis City. They can essentially use that for a fight against Mephiles. I think it'd be great. I'm not against it. Let me know down in the comments. Would you guys like to see Mephiles return as a boss in Sonic X Shadow Generations, since he was a main bad guy against Shadow? I do want to quickly touch upon Black Doom being in the game too, because if you guys don't know, Sean Schmel, the voice of Goku, actually voiced Black Doom back in Shadow the Hedgehog. So I'm actually wondering if Black Doom has any lines in this game, are they going to have Sean come back to voice him? If that is the case, you know, if Black Doom does have lines, I hope they get Sean back, because that'd be a real treat to have him voicing the character again. I just think that'd be great. It's just a random thought. And also regarding voice acting, I assume Kirk Thornton is probably going to be the one voicing Shadow. I gotta be honest, and I've given my thoughts on this in the past. I'm really not a fan of Kirk's Shadow voice. I feel like there's times where it can be good. I think the Twitter takeovers is actually some of his best work regarding Shadow. But yeah, I've never been a huge fan of the Shadow voice. So part of me is kind of hoping, you know, we do get a new Shadow voice here. I'm not holding my breath. I'm sure it's still Kirk Thornton. And if it is, you know, I just hope he does a great performance either way. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the voices so far. I hope Sean comes back to voice Black Doom. and I'm sure Kirk Thornton is probably going to turn a shadow, but we'll have to wait to see. But I will give credit to Sean Nakamura where credit is due. I mean, he did also work on the level design in Sonic Unleashed, and I think Sonic Unleashed has some of the best boost stages in Sonic, some of the most dynamic and fast reactionary type style. And I think those can be very fun. So I'm going to give credit to him. He is capable of making great stuff. I'm not going to, hold him just for what happened in Sonic Forces entirely. But no, I do hope that we do see a turnaround with him as well. Because, Maru Kishimoto is able to really, prove himself and improve where he may have been lacking in the past. I'm hoping Sean Nakamura and his team can do the same thing. I also want to ask the really important questions regarding the gameplay, because we saw Shadow use a Chaos Spear in the gameplay, which is awesome, by the way. But will he also have maybe his Chaos Control powers in Shadow the Hedgehog? Can he use a Chaos Blast? Can he blast through the level if you get a certain meter up high enough? I hope so, because I really think those moves are really, really cool. But no move is as cool as the guns.